Kethavar had stalked prey across 17 star systems. The crimson-scaled apex predator stood 9 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws that could slice through titanium plating and 6 eyes that could track movement across 3 dimensions simultaneously. Its kind, the Zephyrians, were the galaxy's most feared hunters, so feared that even the militant Kraxan Empire paid tribute rather than face them in combat. The beast's latest contract had brought it to a backwater planet called Earth, pursuing a war criminal who had fled to this primitive world. The bounty was substantial, enough credits to purchase an entire moon. All Kethavar had to do was eliminate one pathetic human hiding among the agricultural settlements. The coordinates led to a modest farm surrounded by golden wheat fields that swayed gently in the morning breeze. Kethavar's thermal vision detected a single heat signature inside the simple dwelling, a wooden structure that seemed laughably fragile compared to the reinforced bunkers where most prey chose to make their final stand. As the Zephyrian approached, the front door opened. Out stepped not a cowering criminal, but an elderly human with weathered hands and kind eyes. The man wore simple clothes covered in soil, and his graying hair was tousled from sleep. He looked up at the towering predator without a trace of fear. "Well now," the human said, adjusting his worn hat. "You must be looking for Marcus. I'm afraid you're about 3 months too late, friend." Kethavar's translator struggled with the human's casual tone. In his experience, prey either fled screaming or begged for mercy. This one seemed to be making conversation. "The war criminal Marcus Chen," Kethavar growled, his voice like grinding metal. "Where is he?" The farmer, who had introduced himself as Tom Bradley, gestured toward a small hill behind the farmhouse. "Buried him right over there after the cancer took him. Poor fellow suffered something terrible at the end." For a moment, Kethavar was silent. 3 months of hunting across 4 systems, and his quarry had died of natural causes. The irony wasn't lost on the apex predator. "However," Tom continued, bending to examine a wilting plant, "since you've come all this way, perhaps you'd like some breakfast. I was just about to make some eggs." The offer was so unexpected that Kethavar's predatory instincts faltered entirely. "You invite me to eat?" "Well, you look hungry," Tom replied matter-of-factly, "and I don't get much company out here." What followed was the strangest morning of Kethavar's existence. The human prepared a meal with practiced efficiency, explaining the growth cycles of his crops and the challenges of farming on a planet with unpredictable weather patterns. He spoke to the galaxy's most feared hunter as if he were a neighbor dropping by for coffee. "Marcus helped me with the harvest before he got too sick," Tom mentioned while scrambling eggs. "Funny thing about him, he'd wake up screaming most nights. Whatever he did in that war, it ate at him something fierce." As Tom cooked, Kethavar found himself studying the human's movements. There was no wasted motion, no nervous energy. The man possessed the same economy of movement that Kethavar recognized in master hunters, but directed toward creation rather than destruction. "You don't fear me," Kethavar observed. Tom glanced up from the stove. "Should I? I have killed over 300 sentient beings." "And I've killed over 3,000, Tom replied calmly, plating the eggs. "Mice, rats, crows, insects, anything that threatened my crops. We all kill what we need to kill to survive." The comparison was so simple yet so profound that it stopped Kethavar cold. The human was right. They were both killers, but their purposes differed entirely. Over breakfast, Tom showed Kethavar pictures of his children and grandchildren, explaining how the farm had been in his family for 6 generations. He spoke of droughts that had nearly broken him, of seasons when he'd worked 18-hour days to save a failing harvest, of the quiet satisfaction that came from feeding others. "The thing about farming," Tom said, refilling Kethavar's coffee cup, "is that it teaches you patience. Everything has its season. You can't rush a wheat stalk to grow faster, and you can't make rain come by demanding it. You work with what nature gives you." As the day progressed, something unprecedented happened. Kethavar began to help. At first, it was simple curiosity. He wanted to understand how this fragile-looking human had managed to thrive in such apparent vulnerability. But as he watched Tom repair a fence damaged by wild animals, seed a new section of field, and tend to sick livestock, the apex predator found himself genuinely invested in the outcome. When evening came, Tom offered Keithavar a place to stay for the night. "Storm's coming," he said, pointing to the darkening sky. "These old bones can feel it." The storm was unlike anything in Keithavar's experience. Not the violent, ship-crushing tempests of space, but something primal and earthbound. Rain lashed the farmhouse while lightning illuminated the wheat fields in stark, beautiful contrasts. Tom sat calmly reading a book while Keithavar watched the storm through the window, mesmerized. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Tom commented. "Dangerous as all hell, but beautiful." 3 days passed before the storm cleared. During that time, Keithavar learned more about strength than in all his years of hunting. He watched Tom care for injured animals, repair storm damage without complaint, and share his limited supplies with a neighbor whose own home had been flooded. When it was time to leave, Keithavar found himself reluctant to go. "Tom," he said, struggling with unfamiliar emotions, I do not understand what has happened to me here." The old farmer smiled and clapped a weathered hand on the predator's arm. "You've learned the difference between taking life and protecting it. That's no small thing for a hunter." Keithavar nodded slowly. "I have no prey to pursue. My contract is void." "Well," Tom said, gesturing toward the fields, "I could use help keeping the deer out of my wheat. Doesn't pay much, but the work is honest." That was 5 years ago. The galaxy's most feared apex, Predator now spends his days patrolling the boundaries of a small farm, protecting crops instead of hunting prey. He has learned to read weather patterns, to identify plant diseases, and to find satisfaction in the simple act of nurturing growth. Sometimes, at night, he still dreams of the hunt. But when morning comes, he walks among the wheat fields he now calls home. Guardian of life rather than dealer of death, and knows he has found something more valuable than any bounty: purpose.